All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Living in Tacoma, Washington podcast. We are here today with my great friend and business partner and the managing broker for our team, Chris Titus, who is just across the hallway in the other room there. Super excited to have you guys join us today. We are going to be discussing our market predictions for the year 2024 as it relates to Tacoma, Pierce County, and the King County areas. Chris brings some really great perspective as being a resident of the area forever, as well as, like I said, a managing broker for the state of Washington. So I'm super excited to get into this. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on the live stream today. Really looking forward to talking about some of our predictions for the year to come. Super excited to help more people buy and sell real estate this year. So it's kind of fun to do a little prognosticating and looking into the future about what we think is going to happen, and then looking back on this the following year to see if our wild ideas or things that we thought that were going to happen actually came to fruition. So excited to have the conversation today and be talking with everybody.
Yeah, I was kind of interested. Last year I did like 5 or 6 predictions, and we actually nailed 4 of them. I was like really surprised that we got 4 out of 5 right, but
that's not bad. Yeah,
not too bad. Of course, 4 or 5 of them, they weren't all the best, like most positive ones. So there's that, but we did get them.
It's tough to go 5 for 5, man. I'd say 4 for 5 is probably a pretty solid, percentage there. You'd make the Hall of Fame if you were in baseball with that percentage, right?
Right. You definitely wouldn't get fired for sure. So this year, Lending Tree did basically a panel of people, and they asked if they felt like the housing market this year was at risk for crashing. And I thought it was really interesting of these people they polled, 44% said they did believe there would be a real estate crash this year. Only 25% said no. And 31% said they literally have like absolutely, I guess, no idea what they think. And so that's kind of interesting seeing like the consumer perspective. And on the other side, there was this one as well that asked, do you think you'll ever be able to buy a home again in the future? And this one was another really interesting piece of data. 50% people still felt like, yeah, I'm going to be able to buy another house. 90% said no, and I will never look to buy a house again.
That's a pretty high amount, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy to think that 20% have just given up, and then 11% said no. I don't think I'll be able to buy again. And 19% again, we're just like, I don't know, man. I'm not sure. So, when I was looking at this, Chris, like it really gave me this feeling that I know people say like, oh, the housing market's going to crash or whatever. But the reality is when you look at these numbers and you see the different percentages of people that have different opinions, it really gives me some insight that I kind of feel like people just don't know what's going on. Like, would that kind of feel like where you see this as?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely tracks. If it's not something that you're living, or you're looking at every single day like we do, or you're following because you're actively, thinking about buying or selling a home, or honestly, man, some of the stuff is just boring. It's tough to stay awake when reading some of these articles about the economy and interest rates and, the Fed, bank rate and all these other things. So, yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. Sometimes it's very difficult to, understand and know what some of these trends are and, what's going on in the market or what may happen this coming year if you're just not in it every single day.
Yeah. Well, and so that makes you, I think, a lot more susceptible to whatever hype the media is putting out there. And I do think there's some real value on studying national trends, but I think whenever you get down to brass tacks, as you look at your local market, things are a lot different. Like, it's just too broad of a blanket to really have any form of, you know.
Yeah, I mean, real estate it's a very hyper local thing when it comes to what market trends are doing. Like here in Western Washington, right? We've got the downtown Tacoma market and the downtown Seattle markets, vastly different than what's going on north or south inside or outside of the city. Or, you go a little bit east out to the eastern sides of the county, like Enumclaw or Buckley, or down south into Spanaway, Graham, Eatonville, some of these areas. Or heck, you go east over onto the peninsula out to, Bremerton, Kitsap, some of those areas. Those markets are very, very different than what's going on nationally. And I mean, even within some of those specific areas, neighborhood to neighborhood, within certain towns can have very different things going on as well. So it real estate can be very hyper local. And if you're going to generalize what's going on in the national market, you're probably going to miss the mark if you're really thinking about, a specific move or a sale in a certain area.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is the national data is important, but you really need to be highly focused on your own backyard. And I mean, outside of us, outside of your local agent, in our area, do you have any recommendations for good resources for people to try to find that information when it comes to local market data?
Yeah, I mean, it's always great to, like you said, connect with a local broker, connect with somebody that knows the local market, but, really just doing your digging and doing your due diligence. Local newspapers are going to have a lot of local information about what's going on in specific areas. Big things that you really want to watch out for are employment numbers. What companies are moving into or moving out of areas. Employment numbers have a massive effect on real estate values. And if one neighborhood or one city is going to be on the upswing for the next year or two, or on the downswing because a big employer is moving in or out of the area. So watching, local news stations, local news editorials, reading your local real estate periodicals, those are all things that can definitely help keep you focused on the local, smaller micro markets and what's going on in your specific area, and really just understanding what some of those economic factors are, like job growth, like Fed interest rates, things like that, and watching the inventory levels, because those really have an effect on what prices are going to do as well.
Yeah, and if you guys want to get on if you want to get our newsletter or anything, our information is down there at the description box below. You can hit up our email, subscribe to our newsletter, and we would be more than happy to keep you updated on all of that information. So, all right, Chris, let's jump into these market predictions. I'm going to go first.
All right.
If you want to, we can just go back and forth, and hopefully we don't have the same prediction. And if we do, we'll just cut it down a little bit, because this is live, like I said. So just bear with me. I'm not going to edit anything out of this. So if you're listening to this, this is what's happening. Okay. So number one for me, I believe that interest rates will drop. Now, before people get super excited, I don't think they're going to drop to the scale of where people really want them to be. Okay. So I think you're going to get a break, but I don't think you're going to get the break that you want. I don't think the 4 or 5% mortgage rate makes a comeback. Instead, I really think that we're looking more at a 6% that becomes very, very normal. And Tim, what you think here? I do think this small dip will give area home buyers just enough room to really dip their toes back into the market. What do you think?
Ding, 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 we've got a winner. I mean, I've got the same exact prediction, as my number one on the list too. I believe that interest rates will continue to kind of tick down. Obviously, the historically low rates of, COVID, 3-4%, even low fives, it's probably a thing of the past. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I just don't think that we're going to see those kinds of rates anytime in the near future, barring anything, crazy, unforeseen, economic things going on, or, God forbid, another pandemic or anything else happening. It's very unlikely. I think that rates will probably settle into the mid sixes. Like a lot of the national prognosticators are saying, and a lot of the companies that have some forecasting on some of these things, like Fannie and Freddie and National Association of Realtors and Bankrate and the Fed. All of these big institutions are kind of tracking along the same rate. They think that we're probably in the mid six range, but it's going to take a while to get there. Today I just looked at the 30-year mortgage rate, and it's at 7.59 today for the current rate. So, those rates peaked at, over 8% earlier this year, and coming down to the mid six range is probably something that we can expect getting into mid 2024 and the end of 2024, as the Fed continues to, do those rate cuts throughout the year, like they've said that they're going to. The Fed wants to see inflation at 2%. So until that happens, we're still in for a little bit of a bumpy ride. And, like I said, those rates of 3-4%, they're a thing of the past. If we're at, just last month, inflation was still at 3%. So we've still got a little ways to go. They're hoping for soft landing, in order to lower rates, inflation comes down, kind of all of that perfect, harmony coming together at the same time, which then will, lead into some of our other predictions of, appreciation, home sales, some of those other things.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And adding on to this, I think just, we got very comfortable at those pandemic, lows. And as I'm looking forward here, like looking at the Fed, their current level, I think inflation really has kind of gotten under control. And as I marry that with mortgage rates, I think we're starting to feel like as a country, we're probably not going to have a recession. And therefore, there's really not going to be as much, I think, drive to cut the rates. I do think, like you said, the Fed, I think you're still going to see 2 to 3 Fed mortgage rate or Fed rate cuts through the summer. So if I were a viewer, I would just really be keeping my eye on the 10-year Treasury. That's a really good way to track. Kind of it follows in line with mortgage rates. What do you got? What's your first one you had? I know, was it the same one I just had?
Yeah, that was my number one. If you want me to jump in, I'll go for number two.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. My second prediction for the 2024 real estate market is that home appreciation increases in value will be positive this year. I think that we're likely in the 3 to 5% range conservatively on how much houses are going to increase in value. The historical average is right around 5% every single year. Now that's with some of the crazy swings of 10 to 15% that we've seen in COVID years, and some of the run up in really high home prices over the past 5 years, coupled with the averages of the great financial crisis and the negative effect in home appreciation. So I think that we're probably on track for about a 3 to 5% increase, but it will be positive, but less than average. And some of the factors that have to do with that is that inventory levels definitely have a massive effect on what the appreciation is. Basic supply and demand. And the fact that we are still in very low inventory levels, it does have an effect, and with interest rates kind of ticking down a little bit, yeah, they're still high. We've just talked about that, 6-7% right now. But with inventory still being low, that will continue to push prices higher, because if there's no homes to buy, you have the few people that are out there buying homes competing on the few that are there, and it just continues to drive the prices up. We just had a home this last week that we listed in Kirkland, And we received 4 offers on the house and it went above the list price. Now, that hasn't been the norm for all of 2023. We've seen several situations where, because of the high interest rates and all of the other factors going on, that homes would sit and maybe not receive an offer for a few weeks or even a month or two. And then maybe we have to do a price reduction. We just have less people competing for the houses that were on the market. So, the supply and demand really, have a huge effect on how much homes were appreciating. And that's why we saw flat numbers over the last year or so. Another factor that has to do with that are jobless rates. Jobless rates right now in our state are, kind of between the 3 and 4% range, which are very low, comparative to obviously COVID times and, other economic downturns in the past. So if this stays low, jobless rates and people working will have a positive effect and continue to have a positive effect on the real estate market, thus increasing our appreciation in a positive fashion.
Yeah, this was my second one as well. I had home prices will continue to climb, and it's good numbers. Like last month, Pierce County, which is where Tacoma's centered out of, if you're listening from out of the area, was 2.8%, and King County actually saw a uptick at 7% month over month, which I thought was pretty awesome. I don't know. I feel like there's just so much pent up like buyer demand that as these rates trickle down, like we kind of talked about it in our first point, as these buyers decide to come back to the market, I think there's just going to be such a it's going to be reactive. Like there's not going to be more inventory on the market. So when these buyers come in, it's going to be a competition. Like I'm not saying it's going to be COVID, but like a COVID mini market. Like, don't you think you're going to see us getting back to multiple offer situations again?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the pent up demand. I mean, we've got the millennial generation now, elder millennials getting up into the prime home buying years. We've already kind of gotten there, but the lower end of that age demographic is getting into the upper 30s, low 40s, where it is prime home buying time. People are starting families or going out on their own, and they've been paying rent for 10 years, and now it's time to make an investment. So, there is a lot of pent up demand that has not been able to trickle through the market over the last year and a half, where there was so much shock because of the interest rate increases. You can't go from 3% to 6% in a year and everybody, business as usual. It's just not going to happen. So, there was a massive pump on the brakes on, that generation of people buying homes. So there's probably, 750,000 people in that age demographic that are coming into that didn't get to buy last year. So I agree. The pent up demand is going to continue to push home prices in a positive way.
And I'll tell you my personal thought about this is, I think in the region that we're in, I think spring is going to be really tight. Like I said, I don't think the inventory is going to be there. But this is like a mini prediction off to the side, but I think summer is going to be the season of winning. I think by that point, you could see more inventory come to the market, right? Like, 'cause it always takes consumer a little bit longer to kind of catch on. So I think if rates creep down, there's no inventory, we have the fighting, then people are excited, they bring their home to the market. Well, then summer now we're going to have a little bit more inventory.
Yeah.
And in summer, what do we like to do in the summer in Washington?
Like to go on vacation.
We like to go on vacation. We like to get out. We like to play. Mm-hmm. So many markets are so hot in summer, and like we're just not that hot in summer. So I feel like summer this year could be like the December on the East Coast, or the winter in the Midwest. Like it could be a time to sneak in and really nail down a deal.
Yeah, it definitely can. And to your point, it's really weird that in Seattle, in Washington, we've got that kind of that summer siesta, that summer lull, kind of July through August and into September, where kids are out of school, people are taking vacations, it's beautiful outside, people want to enjoy the summertime when we have it here in Seattle. Like, for instance, right now, we got a cold front coming in. It's like, 20, 30 degrees outside. People are kind of hunkering down. You have that effect in the wintertime, but you have the adverse effect in the summertime here in Seattle, where we do see a little bit of a slowdown in the real estate market, typically during that kind of midsummer and end of summer. So if we don't have the typical amount of homes coming to the market in spring that we have had in years past, because inventory is still kind of low, yeah, there's a very good chance that we could see a lot of increased listings coming to the market in summertime, which could go either way, right? Could create opportunities for buyers. It could create, that pent up demand to come to the market. There's a lot of factors, and you really have to watch what the home sales are doing in those specific areas month to month to watch what's happening based on the year over year totals, because it could have an effect in either direction depending on what happens.
Right. And I would say this year, don't sleep on it, because, if I look at like this little chart here, this is going to show us like the last year. If you're listening on the podcast, I know you can't see this, but this shows kind of some, like a 1 year history of an incline in prices. And like, look at Bonnie Lake here, starting off January at 613 and wrapping up at 699. That's over a year, so I would say don't pause too long. If you see opportunity, strike while the iron's hot, or you could be paying out the rear end again. I mean, you see a lot of stuff about Seattle, maybe just not being as an attractive place right now. Most bigger cities are kind of taking a hit, especially on the West Coast. But if you look at, outside of Olympia, if you look at Tacoma and Bonnie Lake, there's been a big increase in growth in value. So let me ask you this kind of a side question. Why do you think these Pierce County towns have had a better return than King and Thurston?
100% comes down to affordability. 100%, because people are trying to find affordability. They still want to make the investment. They still want to buy a home, but prices in Seattle are 900 something for the entry point to buy a home. Yeah. Whereas down in, Pierce County or some of these other areas farther outside of the city, it's 600,000. So the numbers are drastically different. If somebody can buy the same exact home for $300,000 less and have more of a yard and maybe less crime because they're not in the city, I think that's a lot more attractive to people, knowing that they can work from home, have more flexibility, or have a kind of a hybrid schedule. That is really what's helped keep prices in those positive areas, as far as those areas that are outside of the Seattle metro market.
Totally see that. I mean, you look at like, this is I pulled a report here that's got 3 bedrooms that are roughly 1,500 square feet. And look at this difference. Like Seattle sitting at $904,000, whereas Tacoma is $469 and Bonnie Lake's $593. Like, that is such a crazy spread for literally just a 40-minute drive.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Now, 40 minutes might be a little optimistic on that morning commute, but I digress.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. See, are you up or am I up now? I don't even know anymore.
You started, so I think you're up first on this one.
Okay, perfect. All right. I'm going to change it up a little bit here. Here we go. I believe that in 2024, that new construction will gain market share more than it has.
Okay.
But I believe that it's going to cost them. And here's the thing. A lot of people have not really focused on new construction. They've been, they're kind of sleeping on it in my opinion. But one of the things I follow, I love to invest in the stock market. So I'm always keeping my eyes on what is happening in the stock market. And I look at these quarter returns from some of the biggest builders around, and I was floored at like their returns. I mean, check these out. Like, builders are making money. These net income by quarters is just wildly high. Like, look at Lennar's spread. It's just a constant uptick, right, through 2023. And this is the last quarterly return that I got. But, we have KV Homes in our area. They posted a really high return. We've got Lennar in our area. We've got all these people, most of them in our area, and they've had a really big uptick. But here's kind of why I think that is going to be something that comes into play this next year, is because I don't think that mortgage rates are going to be like appealing enough to settle. I think people are getting more and more picky as they're going out to buy homes, and they just want exactly what they want. And, Chris, you and I both saw this with a lot of our relocation clients this year. They favored new construction because of, in our area, bigger communities. They had, air conditioning, which is still kind of hit and miss in our market. On the other side too is, we have an aging inventory problem. Like, we have so many just old ass houses.
Yeah.
Right. And tell me, is an old ass house much cheaper than a brand new house?
Honestly, it's not.
No. So, if you're selling, the good side is if you're selling an old ass house, like, you're probably just as good as somebody buying a new house. But I do think that with this, I really do see these builders having to give more. I think, and this is my opinion, this is what I think they're going to really start sweetening the pot, not only because of, rates coming down, but making homes more affordable, but we're also seeing a stronger builder presence. So I think you're going to see more families that are going to be willing to move into spec homes, which are just homes that are kind of built builder grade, but they're new this year. But I also think you're going to see a lot of builders start competing against other builders, not just the market, and having to do things like, do special lender credits, special rates, closing costs. And I know we've seen that before, but I think this year it's not going to be as sexy as it was, because rates are going to be giving us a little bit of a break and people are getting more adjusted. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree with, like you said, we've seen some of our clients here moving into the area that have relocated choose to go the new construction route rather than buying a resale home. If you're paying $700,000 for a brand spanking new home, or $660 for a home that, it's updated, but it was built 50 years ago. Some people are just going for that. Hey, let's go for that new home smell, right? Let's go for that, brand new everything. Comes with a home warranty, comes with a bunch of incentives, to your point, with the builders having to give more. They're giving closing cost credits, they're giving mortgage credits, they're giving lower rates, they're giving, design and upgrade options kind of included. But they're also able to do that because they have record profits, in some cases. So I agree that new construction will take a little bit more of the market share, but builders are going to have to contribute to some of that cost in order to entice people to do that. Because, the couple of people that I'm thinking about in my head right now that did go that route, they had flexibility. Not everybody can wait 6 to 7 months to get a home out of the ground before they can move into it. So new construction sounds amazing and it sounds great and everybody wants to have the bright, shiny new house, but some of those factors that go along with new construction, even with the incentives, they just don't work for everybody. Sometimes, people have life. They have to move right now. They can't wait 7 months for a home to be built. even if it is shiny and new, and even if they do get some of those, incentives to go along with building the new home. So yeah, I could definitely see, new home construction taking on some market share this year, but at a little bit of a cost to the builder's profits.
Yeah, and especially not having like big major master plan communities out of just a few. These new builds are a little bit more like they're a little more spread out or in smaller pockets. And that was another reason why I felt like they were going to have to really heavily contribute if they really wanted to win people. And I also think that we're going to see a lot more, first time home sellers are going to be the ones moving into new construction. I don't think at our price point for new construction that it's really a first time home buyer type of game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the other factor too that you have with new construction here in Washington State is, I mean, quite frankly, it's about, the master plan community point. We just don't have a lot of them here in Washington State. You've got a few, like you got 10 Trails out in Covington, you got Tahale in the Bonnie Lake area. You've got a few others kind of in a few different areas, but for the most part, there's not a lot of massive master plan communities popping out of the ground. What you do find with new construction is you'll find the 2 or 3 acre plots that turn into 6 to 12 homes that have smaller builders that are just building them as they're selling them. Wait 6 months, they sell it, they build another one. Or these 10 acre plots where they're putting in 15 to 20 homes or things like that. On a little bit larger lots. You just don't see the 10,000 homes popping out of the ground in this one neighborhood, and we're building a school, and we're building a 7-Eleven, and we're building, restaurants and coffee shops and all that stuff in this neighborhood to support that. We just don't have that much of that going on here in Washington State to where a lot of people are going to those. You just see more of the smaller builders on the smaller plots subdividing and building the new construction.
Totally. All right, what's your next big one here? I'm excited to hear it.
Okay, we kind of talked about it a little bit coming out of the home appreciation, conversation. But my third prediction is that existing home sales will increase this year, but it's still going to remain a seller's market. So really, it just comes down to inventory is really what we're talking about here. So existing home sales, new home sales will increase this year. Last year, they were down about 6% year over year this time. So we did see a reduction in new homes and inventory coming to the market in 2023. So I think that will increase. Biggest factor in that, people have been stuck in their low interest rate homes for the last 2 years, and they're just throwing their hands up and they saying, life's got to go on. I've got to live my life. I need to move. I've got a job transfer. I've got my family is growing. I'm downsizing. I'm retiring. I don't like this house anymore. And you know what? We're not going to see a 3% interest rate again. It's just not going to happen. I got to bite the bullet. I'll take my equity. I'll deal with the rate right now. I'll go buy another house. I'll sell my house. So I really do. I feel like new home inventory is going to come up. Now, like I said, some of the factors that are holding people back, almost 80% of mortgage holders reported having a rate of less than 5%. 90% reported having a rate of less than 6%. A third of people reported less than 3%. So people have just been stuck in their homes because they don't want to give up these amazing rates that they've got on their mortgages right now. So it can be very, very difficult to let that go. But as life goes on and life happens, people are going to slowly acclimatize to the current interest rates and just throw their hands up and say, I can't do it anymore. I got to move. Life goes on. We've got other things going on, other factors that are pushing us to move. Again, talking about the millennial generation, people wanting to buy homes, that has just, people are going to break loose of that as rates dip down a little bit from their highs that they were on, albeit not going back to historical lows. And to that point, hey, maybe there's some opportunity to assume somebody's mortgage. And that's another conversation. We could put together a whole podcast on that subject, but there are some creative ways that people can maybe assume some of those 80% of homeowners that have a less than 5% rate, assume that rate of the balance that they have for that, and then maybe get a second mortgage at the current rate, or bring the cash that they have from the sale that they're doing to put towards that purchase. There's a lot of different creative ways that you could still maybe take advantage of some of those rates that people have by assuming them, but also not pay the 6 or 7 or 8% rates that people have got right now. So yeah, my prediction, number 3, is that existing home sales will increase this year, but not quite to a level where we're going to have 5 months plus of inventory. It's still going to be a seller's market.
Yeah. So Chris, do you feel like it's still worth living here with everything going up? If you have to commute to Seattle or open an OnlyFans page, it's a common way.
Feet Finder just wasn't doing it for me. Nobody wants to see that, so we're going to skip that. But yeah, I love Washington State. Obviously, I've lived here my entire life. It's expensive to live here, but you know what? I really feel like it's one of the most beautiful places in the entire country. Mild climate, amazing beauty in nature. Yeah, there's job growth. There's you can be anywhere in an hour and a half. You can be at the ocean. You can be in the desert. You can be in the mountains. You can be in the city. You can be out in the sticks. Like, it's a great place to live. So even with the increase in living expenses, which honestly all of America is dealing with right now with inflation, it's still a place that I love to call home, and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon.
No, and I see like people are getting, in the comments section. So first of all, if you don't run a YouTube channel, let me tell you, people are the meanest humans on the planet are in YouTube comments. I see all the time, like, oh my God, I can't afford it. Things are crazy. This place alone, and it's not just this place. Like back where I come from in Missouri, like people made like $12 an hour, but a house is $300,000. Like, and a $50,000 car is still $50,000. Dinner out still is dinner out. So financially, I feel like at least we're in a better position because we have, first of all, we have beautiful things. It's not just the plains here, but also there is more of an opportunity with wages than what you would expect. There are a lot of people that move to Tennessee, Missouri, Arkansas, and I hear from them later about, geez, like I'm making a quarter of what I used to make. So yeah, I think it's absolutely worth it to move to Washington State. I mean, I obviously did it, so I have feelings about it. All right, let me go on to my next one here. So this one is kind of crazy, but I've heard so much this year about there being a mortgage crisis. Like 2007, here it comes. I got to tell you, this isn't even a prediction. Like the data just doesn't support a mortgage crisis. In fact, I actually 100% know that credit is getting harder to come by. I've got some stuff here I'm going to show you because I want to make sure that everybody sees this and gets an opportunity to, of course you're listening, I apologize, you can't see this obviously, but take a look here. This is the mortgage credit availability index level by month. And what stinks about this one right here is this one doesn't go back to like 2007 or anything. But you can see, right, like right before COVID, it was like, oh man, we got, we're giving out credit, we're giving out mortgages, we're making life easy. And then COVID came, everyone was like, oh, hell no, we're going to shut down like mortgages. Like the index dropped like crazy. And by the way, the baseline here is going to be like March of 2012, what they consider like the baseline for like your credit availability, for what people are willing to loan, what investors are willing to put out there. And over the past just like 2 years, since 2022, like we've just seen credit availability just sink, like hit, like literally go down below average. Like in fact, it decreased by 4.6% last month alone. So this is a big leading indicator that like standards are really, really tightening. Um, we're just not going to see, things being as easy as they once were. If you look here at this one, this gives you kind of an idea of where these stand on different loans, and you can see each one of these has made a move, has taken a little bit of a dive. You've got your conventionals went down by 3.2%, government-backed loans 5.9, jumbos 1.7, and conforming at 5.9. And really, credit availability has declined to its lowest level actually since 2012 in December. Like that's pretty crazy. Some of this goes with like you're seeing more loan programs being removed from the marketplace. There's a little less support from the government. We're not seeing as many, like the investors are getting a lot more strict about what they want. And ultimately, these are indicators for me that is the exact opposite. I don't see in any way a mortgage crisis. I see the opposite. I'm actually a little bit more concerned for like the standards getting too tight. So rates might drop a little bit, but it looks like these lending institutions are wanting more. And Chris, I'm gonna have you chime in here in just a second, but here's one I've got from all the way back in the day, right? So here is this scale right here that you can see kind of gives you a breakdown of mortgage, how easily essentially it was to kind of get a mortgage. And you can see here that if you look up through about 2007, like it was just a sharp incline, like easy peasy. And then we hit the financial crisis, tanked. And other than the recovery from the financial crisis, it has actually not been harder. It's not, since then, it's not been harder to get a mortgage than it is right now. And to me, this is a huge indicator that we are absolutely not going to see a mortgage crisis in 2024. And like I would put my money on this. This is the only one that I'm putting my money on, but this is not 2008. Now, my question for you, Chris, is if rates do keep decreasing, which we've been seeing other than the week of Christmas, because that's pretty normal, right? You normally don't see a lot of people hopping out to go buy a house the week of Christmas. But if these standards continue to get more strict, how do you think that plays out with your prediction of a higher increase of home sales?
It's a balancing act, right? So yeah, if they're tightening credit, qualifications, if they're making it more difficult for people to qualify for mortgages, if home prices are staying steady and increasing, then I mean, the rational thought process is well, then how can people continue to buy houses? How can they afford that? How do we continue to see increases? It's because when people are applying for these mortgages, the people that are applying and getting approved and buying the homes, they can qualify. Wages are still up. Employment is at all-time highs. The jobless rates are low. People that can qualify for these mortgages are the ones that are getting these mortgages, which plays right into your point of we're most likely not going to see a mortgage crisis in 2024. Now, are foreclosure rates on the rise? They're on the rise. They're upticking. Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of people are still, a lot of that stuff from the COVID era and a lot of the government programs that were helping people stay in their homes, even though they couldn't make their mortgage payments, they are starting to expire and they're going through those foreclosure processes. But all of those programs that the government rolled out with the forbearance programs, with the mortgage servicers, allowing, all of these things to go on to help keep Americans in their homes, they worked. And people took advantage of those programs, re-amortized their loans, worked through those issues in order to stay in their homes. and we are not seeing the flood of foreclosures like some people expected to see. And the fact is that the people that are getting mortgages and being approved because of those charts, because the credit and lending is tightening, the standards are going higher in order to get those mortgages. Those people can't afford it. They've got good credit reports. They've got good credit scores. They've got good income. They've got great jobs. All of those factors are important. And most of the time with people that have all of those factors, they're going to continue to pay their mortgage, or they're going to figure out a way. And with the increase in values that we have seen, this is another huge factor too. The increase in values that we've seen over the past 5 years, most Americans are sitting on equity. If you are sitting on equity and you're getting behind in your mortgage, 95 people out of 100 or more are not just going to let the bank take their home. They're going to sell it. They're going to capitalize on that equity, retain that equity, maybe go and rent something for a year or two, get back on their feet, get back on a more stable ground. So, those are all factors on what's going on. And honestly, I wouldn't say that I was a victim, but I was a part of that financial crisis that happened. I actually bought 2 houses back in 2008. You know what they did when they asked me if I wanted to buy a home, if I could qualify for a home? They said, okay, you got a pulse? Okay, here's $700,000. You can go buy a couple of houses. Just tell me what you make. They're not doing that nowadays. You're basically going through a colonoscopy in order to get a mortgage nowadays. Credit reports, income reports, verifying your assets, making sure that you've got good payment histories, no late payments for 12 to 24 months. All of these things that just were not in place back then. And yeah, it was getting much easier to get credit as things were values were going higher. We were going in the wrong direction as far as lending standards, right before COVID. But when COVID happened, everything dropped off a cliff. These lenders didn't know if people were going to be able to keep their jobs. So yeah, the purse strings got tight, and they're still staying tight to this day because they want to make sure that the money that they're giving out and the money that they're lending is actually going to be repaid. And for the most part, most of the people that are getting these loans qualify for them. They've got good credit, they've got good jobs, they can repay them. Or the people that were getting behind during COVID, they took advantage of the programs worked, and they are getting back on their feet. So no, I don't think that we're going to see a huge increase or a mortgage crisis or a flood of foreclosures either.
No, and I think, a lot of the, while we do see an increase in foreclosures, the kind of hidden thing there is that there weren't any foreclosures during COVID. So the fact that there are now some means there's an increase. That wasn't the case, several years ago. So, all right, what's your next one?
My next prediction for the 2024 market is I think that there's going to be a push to get people, continued push to get people back into the offices, and which that will have an effect on people moving back in to some of these metro areas.
Absolutely.
And so, with people having to either have a hybrid schedule where, okay, you can work from home 2 days a week, but you got to be in the office 3 days a week, or no, like Elon, he's like, no, we're not doing it. Everybody's in the office full time, all the time, or you're gone. You're going to start seeing more of that as these companies and employers start to push to get people back into the offices, continue to get the productivity up. You can be on either side of the coin on whether you're more productive at home or in the office, but as you guys are all seeing, there's just more of a push to get people back into the offices, which I think will in turn have an effect on people moving back to some of these metro areas that we've seen a huge exodus of over the COVID years. There's more of a push of people getting back into there. So I think that's going to drive prices. It's going to drive sales. It's also going to drive condo sales in some of those areas. for people moving back into the cities and the metro areas to be closer to the office, closer to work, because, hey, I worked from home for the past 2-3 years during COVID. I had to roll out of bed at 7:58, log into my computer at 8 o'clock, and I could press start on the coffee machine and I'd be ready to work at 8 o'clock. So a lot of that stuff is going away, and you're just not going to see that as much. And so I think that you're just going to see more of a, not a massive, but you're going to see more of a migration than we have seen the exodus back into some of those metro areas because of the push to get people back into offices.
Yeah, you basically have the choice to either quit your job or move.
Yep.
I've seen that out in Tahale, during COVID. A lot of the tech workers from Meta and stuff left and bought a house out there because they could get out of the city, and now they're getting called to come back. Can you imagine living out there and having to drive into Seattle multiple days a week? I'm sorry, there's no way in hell I'm doing that.
No, I mean, it's tough. It puts people in some pretty tough spots to have to make that decision. And honestly, a lot of people do. They do that. And that's why you got the traffic jam going into Seattle every single day from Bonnie Lake, and it takes you an hour and a half to get into Seattle going one direction. A lot of people make that commute, and it's very tough. So, people don't want to have to be in the car for 3 hours a day just to go into the office. I mean, that's a ton of your life that you're losing every single day making that commute to the office. So, that push to get closer to work, whether it be, hey, we're going to move all the way into, West Seattle or Columbia City, or, maybe the smaller suburbs right close to the downtown area. You're definitely going to see some of that. But hey, maybe it's just, hey, let's move from Puyallup. Let's just get up to Renton. Let me take 45 minutes off of my commute so that I don't have to drive that extra 45 minutes down the Valley Freeway. Or, hey, let's move, let's get out of Everett and maybe let's get down into Shoreline, so that at the very least, I'm not spending that extra hour in the car every single day. So I do really think that there's going to be a push to get some people closer to where they have to commute to, not an exodus from, the suburbs or, the rural areas, but really just, a flow of people back to some of those areas where they moved out of because they just didn't have to go into the office, where now they do.
Yeah, I mean, look, best life hack I can give you for living around Seattle, best life hack I can give you for living around Tacoma, be a native, work natively. Like, if you can get a job close to where you live, like, your quality of life will increase 10 times over.
Absolutely.
And I think we're going to see more of this, Chris. Like, you and I both are big believers in productivity in the office. Like, we both know that we do, but we both know that we accomplish more in the office. Sorry, everybody, that's just the case. Like, I wish it wasn't that way. But employers feel the same. They feel the same damn way. Like, they know you're goofing off at home. Like, I don't know a single work from home person that is like hardcore, like locked in, dialed in. Like, my wife works from home, bro, and like my kids need something every 45 minutes.
Yeah.
They need a ride. They need a snack. They've got an appointment. They're just texting her to see what she's doing. Okay, that doesn't happen if you work in the office. Like, I don't know why. I probably called my mom at work and was like, "Are you actually working?" But it is just a crazy difference in productivity. And even though we've seen on the commercial real estate side, we've seen Meta and some of these companies pull back some of their office spaces. I think they're letting go of space, but they're still going to require people to come in. It's just going to be, not as broad of a space that you can come into. Maybe you're losing.
Yeah, and look, hey, there's an exception to every rule, right? Or there's a flip side to every coin. There's probably a few people on this podcast or this live right now that are like, you guys are freaking crazy. There's no way I'm getting more done wasting an hour of my day driving to the office. I just get more done at home. Hey, I can appreciate that. More power to you guys. Not everybody's like that. And as you guys know, based on a lot of these larger employers that are pushing to get people back into the office, whether you feel that way or not, there's still going to be a push to get people back into the office.
Yeah, it's going to be a big change. It's going to take a while, I think, for people to get adjusted to regular human work again.
Yeah, absolutely. So Austin, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Yeah,
What is your fourth prediction for the real estate market this year?
this is actually my fifth. This is my last one.
Okay.
Um, this is going to be crazy. Okay. The new starter home is the single family rental, and the first home purchased is now a rental.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So here's the thing. Look, shit's expensive. All right. I think there's going to be some improvement in home buying, like affordability in 2024. But man, I still know a lot of people who are personally going to be just straight up priced out. Like, no matter how I spend it, no matter how much we pray for them, when you look at the demand and the prices, I think you're just still going to see a lot of people who are priced out of buying. And I think the option of doing a single family rental will create like a more affordable option for people to enjoy amenities like, nice backyards and more space that they, wouldn't have in something like an apartment or, a townhouse or anything. But the reality is, if you're buying now, like there's a lot of neighborhoods that you can actually rent a property for about, for actually less than, what it would cost you, or sorry, you would rent it for less than what it would cost you to buy it right now. And we're seeing some pretty crazy, trends in general with people, and they're moving around in this space, right? Like, take a look right here. You can see these are kind of the rents rise in the Midwest, East and South, and here is the West Coast. We earned the poop brown stripe, so yay for us there. But you see just kind of this uptick, right? Just going up, and this says the average rent here is around $2,300. I was doing some searching online, and that was not at all what I found. I was seeing stuff on like Trulia for 32, 35, 4,000. And of course, I'm looking at like single family rentals, 3 bedrooms. I'm not looking at like a 1 bedroom apartment, because the whole point of my prediction is single family housing.
Yeah.
That's really the key indicator for me. And then there's actually a second part to this. So first of all, I don't think there's any longer a stigma around renting. Like, if it makes sense for you, it makes sense for you. I don't think you should do it forever. If you're relocating here, you absolutely should not be renting. I'm just going to be 100% honest with you. If you're relocating here, if you have the funds to sell your house and move out here, you should not rent a property. For what you would gain even in just 2 years of equity, it would shock you. Tell me about that.
Well, I'll challenge that a little bit. I would say there's probably a break-even number, right? Okay, so I think that 2 years is kind of that break-even number, right? If you don't plan to be here for 2 years or more, then okay, it's probably a good idea to rent, right? Like it's not such a bad idea, because you're not going to. It's going to cost you all of the gains that you got over those 2 years in order to sell, if you're just going to sell it. Now, if you are going to move out here, buy a house, and then move away and keep it as a rental, that's a whole different thing, right? It's an investment. You're keeping it for long term. You're going to turn it into a rental property. That's definitely something. Yeah, you're right. Don't waste your money on renting. Buy something, because you're going to keep it for the long term. But man, anything less than 2 years, like we've got a couple of clients right now that we were just meeting with yesterday. They're on that about 1.5 year mark, and they're very close to their break-even number. They're going to walk away with a little bit of cash, but honestly, if if anything crazy were to happen and it didn't sell for the price that we need it to, there's a good chance that they may have to write a check in order to sell. And so I'd say 2 years is probably that safe place to, if you're going to be here longer than that, or you're going to keep it as a rental. Yeah, absolutely. Don't rent something. Don't throw your money away. But if it's going to be shorter than that, let's look at all your options.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually have a secondary point to this prediction, which is I really believe that more single family homeowners are going to turn their previous property into an investment property and rent it out rather than selling to move.
Yep.
They have these ultra low mortgage rates, like, that are just held by existing homeowners. And this is, for a lot of people, these are options that actually pencil out for them, right? Like, they can actually make this move. And on top of this, like, if I look at what we're seeing as far as like rental vacancies, like where there's holes in the system, if we look here at this like rental vacancy chart, you can see that rental vacancy is hella low, like 6.6% rental vacancy, and this is, thank you to Redfin for this data. And it did climb a little bit, but there's still plenty of options here to find renters. It's not super high, but it's starting that trend right back up. So if you could, obviously, caveat to that is you have to be able to afford your house and be able to buy the next one. By the way, if that's something you're interested in, please reach out to us, because we do have really great lenders that can help you as far as structuring a rental agreement to do that so you can buy your next house. So my question to you is, do you agree with me or do you disagree with me on this? Do you think you're going to see more homeowners that have those golden handcuffs elect to turn their homes here in Pierce County over to investment properties versus selling them? And the caveat to that is, knowing what our rental laws are like, knowing how much of a pain in the ass it is, knowing that you're probably a mom and pop renter, I still think something we're going to see more than we saw last year. I don't think it's gonna be a ton, but I definitely see an increase in it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going to go. It is extremely difficult to be a landlord in Washington State or anywhere on the West Coast or East Coast, for that matter. And depending on what way a certain state leans politically, can have a massive effect on how easy it is to be a landlord. Now, the great thing about so the East or West Coast is you're probably going to have more appreciation in a house. So you're going to get that appreciation, not so much the cash flow, because the prices are higher and your mortgage payment's higher, and you can't rent it for more than what the mortgage is, or not a huge amount more. Maybe you're breaking even, but the flip side of that is, you're getting some of those value increases year over year. Whereas somewhere in the Midwest or the Bible Belt, or some of these other places that have less expensive homes, but rent prices are higher or more comparable to what we would have out here, you're going to cash flow on that rental rather than having those value increases year over year. So it's kind of like you got to take that balancing act. But yeah, to your point, it can be very difficult to be a landlord here in Washington State. Seattle, Tacoma, all of these cities are passing ordinances that make it more difficult to be a landlord. They're making it more easy to be a tenant. It's kind of leaning towards the way of when it was during COVID, where you couldn't increase rent, or you got to give long time frames for notices of move outs, or you got to have reasons to be moving somebody out that's within the rules or the regulations. It can be very difficult to be a landlord. When it comes to the affordability factor and people thinking about keeping that home as a rental property, that all of those factors are going to come into play. But to your point, back to the lender thing is, if you guys have questions about that, and you want to know, is it financially feasible? hey, reach out. We'll link you up with one of our preferred lenders that can really take a deep dive financial analysis into the situation for you. And, we've got property managers that we can recommend to help you manage those properties if that's something that you're thinking about. Or hey, maybe it just doesn't make financial sense for you guys to do that and keep it as that first rental property. Maybe we need the equity out of it to go buy that second house. Maybe, we can't get enough rent for it in order to cover the mortgage payment 100%. Or because of lending requirements, we can only get a credit of 75% of that rent payment to count towards our mortgage payment for the debt to income ratios. There's so many different factors when it comes to a decision like that. And, the rental market, the laws, the affordability, the strategy around it, what you're trying to buy on the back end, all of that has a factor in the decision that you're going to make with that. But I think that you're going to see more of that because people want to invest in something, and moving from your first house, turning it into a rental into your next house is definitely one of the easier ways to step into that.
Love it. Good stuff. All right. We're down to your number 5 now.
Okay. My number 5 is I foresee that we are going to have a massive increase in the density of what type of housing we're going to have here in Washington State, in the Puget Sound region, simply because of some of the bills that passed through Olympia, through our legislature last year. We had a middle housing bill, and we had several other real estate related bills go through the state Senate and the state House this last year that are increasing the allowable density, meaning how many units we're allowed to have in a given area in some of these urban growth zones that are within the state. And the state is mandating that some of these smaller municipalities, these smaller cities, has to adopt a way for homeowners to put ADUs, accessory dwelling units, detached accessory dwelling units, cottages in the backyard, additional units in the lower level of a house. Or if you're closer to transit, then you're allowed to put a multi-unit building on that in that zoning rather than a single family house or only a duplex. So the increase in allowable density based on laws that have passed here in Washington within the last year is going to have a massive effect on the density of housing that is being built and people are allowed to have in some of these areas that are in the urban growth zones.
So for 2024, I know this stuff is kind of, newer past and whatnot. What do you see changing specifically in 2024 in our area with this? I know we've talked to some guys building ADUs, but do you think this is a trend that's going to be taking off this year? I mean, do you think
it's something that we're already seeing, and with the passage of these bills, it's just going to increase in popularity. So the fact that the state at a state legal level is telling all of the cities that they have to allow increases in density, that alone is going to increase the popularity of it. So really it comes down to what's the highest and best use of a piece of real estate as far as the value is concerned. Well, if you can put 2 units on a property rather than 1 unit, that means that you can get double the rent for that property, thus increasing the value. And that the multiplying factor only gets greater the more units that you can put onto a property. So the fact that the state is allowing it and pushing these smaller cities to allow it, and we've already seen some notices come out in some of the rural areas about the urban growth areas and bills that they're passing in order to increase those urban growth areas. I've seen some people in some local Facebook groups, community groups saying, hey, I got this flyer. They're saying that they want to increase the urban growth area. What does that mean? Well, it really just means that these cities want to increase the urban growth area so that when those laws really do take effect over the next year to 2 years, that Then in those urban growth areas, they are required to allow more density. And it just comes down to housing. The state is trying to create more housing for the homeless situation. They're trying to create more affordable housing for lower income families. They're trying to create more housing for, younger folks that just can't afford a $600,000 house at a 7% interest rate, working a support staff job or working as a waiter or working at the gas station, or all of these entry level positions that people have to live in, but they can't afford a $600,000 house at 7% mortgage. So the whole thing really comes down to increasing housing, increasing affordable housing, and making some of these areas more dense so that they can't create those units.
As far as making these areas more dense, let's say, you have a community and you have several homeowners who end up deciding to build detached units, take full advantage of this. How do you feel this will play out if people in the neighborhood end up wanting to sell and they've actually built and sold lower price point properties? Is this going to cause a negative impact on the resale of the more traditional standardized homes that aren't carrying the detached units on them?
I'd say it's all real estate is a case by case basis, right? Like no two houses are the exact same. Okay, maybe a couple of houses that are built on the same block with the exact same layout, and no factor changings. But for the most part, it's going to be a case by case basis. Like, okay, where are these units built? Is it visible from the street? Those ones that they did build with those extra units, have they sold recently? Are they selling for an increased price? Those are all going to be factors in comparable home sales on how we value the real estate that we're selling. Now, the state has built in some protections to help with that. Some of these HOA communities that have it built into their CC&Rs, their covenants, conditions, and restrictions, that you're just not allowed to build an ADU or a DADU on the property because of the covenants for that community. Well, then that is an outlier from what the state is making some of these cities do. If it's in the CC&Rs that they can't do it, then they can't do it. So in those communities, it's not going to affect anything. You're not going to have increased density because you're protected based on your CC&R. So a lot of people talk about, oh, I don't want to live in an HOA because I don't want Karen down the road telling me I can't, paint my house or, raise a flag. Whereas, hey, this might be the adverse effect where that HOA and the CC&Rs might protect you if you don't want to live in a community where there's increased density or a cottage in the backyard of every house, or they're popping up more often.
Yeah, can you imagine 2024 being the year of people fall in love with HOAs?
Hey, crazier things have happened, I think.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you hopping on here with me today. I'm going to try to keep Chris coming on here and helping us out with all of his knowledge. Those are our predictions for the real estate world in 2024. No matter which platform you're listening on, I would love to see what your thoughts are. So drop a comment. Let me know what your big real estate prediction is. And of course, if you're listening on Apple Music, be sure to leave this podcast a 5-star review. Next week, I have Ollie coming on. We moved his family from the Dallas, Texas area.
Nice.
One thing that we've had an interesting experience with has been Texas and people moving from Texas and Texas's opinion of our area. So I'm really excited to break down the reasons for their move, what that experience was like relocating from the most conservative state on the planet to our area, and then just really, spending some time with a really good dude. So until next time, guys, Chris, thank you for joining us. And of course, I'm Austin of Tacoma, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. It was great being on here with you today. Appreciate it.